All right. Hi, Kevin. How are you?
Oh, I'm quite well, thank you.
Great. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks
Um,
for having me.
you were just telling me before we got on that you do audiobooks. That's why the huge microphone in your face. Yeah.
Yeah. I've started writing books a couple years ago, and after I finished I think the eighth book I published, my girlfriend came over to me and she said, "Why don't you just record them? Because you can." I'm reading my books to her. Um, One, to get an idea if the story is good, and also just because I enjoy it as a ritual for the couple. Um, and she said, "Why don't you just record it and then sell that too? Because there's a huge market of people who just don't have time to read, but they prefer listening." So I started trying that, and by now I have recorded five of my books.
So, do you only record your own books, or are you doing other people's books as well?
I'm so busy with my own, I don't even have time for others.
Okay. All right. So, you've written how many books then? Five?
Right now, I have finished 12 books.
12.
Published are eight.
Wow. Okay. And what genre are your books primarily?
I'm mixing between science fiction and fantasy.
Okay, those are two separate genres.
Exactly. I'm writing. I have four science fiction books and I have four fantasy books, and in the end, I'm going to make turn them into sci fantasy.
Okay, somebody explain this to me because I'm very naive on genre and I couldn't understand why fantasy and science fiction were different. But somebody explained to me that science fiction has to be based in science, where fantasy does not. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. My personal definition would be to say that science fiction is usually in the future, because you have lots of technology based things happening. You have spaceships, space travel. Usually, it's something around other planets and space travel, and fantasy usually involves some kind of magic. It's more medieval style, so a little older, like Lord of the Rings, basically.
Oh, I see. So, okay, so fantasy could be in the future, but it also
Could
could
be,
be
yeah,
in the past. Science fiction is probably never going to be in the past, right?
yeah.
Are you writing I mean, is that what you do for a living or do you do something else?
I wish I could do that for a living. No, I'm working as a marketing specialist for a Finnish company, actually.
A Finnish company from Finland.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. Are you in the United States?
No, no, I'm sitting in the center of Germany right now. That's where I live.
Okay. I wasn't quite sure where you were from, where you were calling in from. How is the COVID situation in Germany?
Oh, geez, don't get me started.
Okay, it's not
That
good
whole
then, yeah.
that whole lockdown situation is really tough, and we have many people arguing about if it makes sense or not, and it's getting worse.
So are you guys still pretty much shut down? I mean, are restaurants and everything
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
much shut down? Yeah, yeah.
Anything but house arrest.
How long have you guys been under that lockdown?
Since November, different stages of severity. So we
Oh,
started with
wow.
closing restaurants and stuff, and by now it's not even allowed to meet other people more than one other person.
So I guess Oktoberfest was canceled.
Everything was
Yeah.
canceled.
I was in Munich in 1980 and went to Oktoberfest. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that.
Yes,
Yeah,
still a big thing here. People were pissed about that.
I bet. What made you decide to start writing? Your first book, you said, when did you write that? When did you write your first book?
Uh, I started writing it, I think it was 2011. That's when I first tried to write some fantasy story. Basically, I'm a total nerd, so I spend a lot of my time watching movies, I'm playing video games, reading other books. And at one point, I decided that every story I've ever played, watched, read was somewhat different from what I would have done. I was not content with some things usually, and I
Ah,
decided one day when I was pretty bored, actually at work, when I was a trainee and I didn't get any work, so I had to somehow do stuff. So I started just writing up a script, and that's when I started out. And I was able to publish the first one in 2016.
So are you self-published or do you have a publisher?
Yeah, I'm self-published.
Okay. It's funny your motivation for starting to write. You'd be surprised how many people in this world have started something, not necessarily writing, started a company, started something based on the idea of, well, I can do better than that. When they've read something or they've seen something or bought something, it is truly astonishing how many people started with that.
But I'm not really saying that I'm doing it better than others. I'm just doing it differently in a certain way that I feel happy about. I don't really think that I'm better than anybody.
Well, okay, better might be a bit judgmental, but
Yeah.
you were not content with what you read and said, I'm going to do something else that's going to
Mm.
make me happier, and maybe it'll
Yeah.
make somebody else happier as well. So which book are you promoting right now on this show?
I have published my first novel in English language in early January, and that's a sci-fi novel. It's called The Commander, Guardian of Utopia. Basically, going to set up a storyline of 4 books.
Okay, you want to give us a synopsis of the book?
Well, it's about a young privileged son based on a planet called Utopia, which is the first human colony we have in outer space. It's approximately, I'd say, it's in the year 2500 maybe. And they have an ongoing war with an alien species, and so the government-led, the military-led government is going to draft people into military just because they have to, and Carter is going to be drafted against his will. So, coming from a privileged family, basically, he has not known anything that's forced onto him. He has been private schooled, he's educated, and he is strong, morally strong. But now he's getting mixed up with people that are totally different, working class guys, girls that he's interested in because he's just 18, so he's always looking out for that. And now they have to get along somehow while being trained by rigorous trainers. They have to go through the whole base camp situation, learning how to shoot, having field exercises, going on to different planets, check everything out. And then they are even drawn into this war without it was even planned. And that whole stuff is forming him and his comrades into a team, also making him a soldier that he hasn't even expected to become. So that's basically the origin story of this commander. He's going to be the commander later on.
Is this anything like Starship Troopers?
I've heard that reference a couple of times in my Amazon reviews, but I have never seen Starship Troopers ever.
Okay. Well, Starship Troopers, I mean, from what you were describing, the beginning sounds like it, but Starship Troopers is basically humans fighting giant cockroaches. I mean, like huge cockroaches.
Yeah.
One's the size of a bus. And they go on to the planets, and it's worth seeing. I mean, I think they did about 3 or 4, one, two, three. The first one is good. I didn't get beyond that one, but and are your other stories that you've written, are they similar in theme?
Well, the Commander series, as I mentioned, is consisting of 4 books, and after his training is done, he's going to set out into the galaxy, becoming part of the special forces. He's going to be part of battles, getting to know other species as well, working together with them. So there's going to be a lot more happening that's not even related to that war that we have in the first book. And the other books that I've written, I've switched after the 4th book to the fantasy genre. That's totally different. Cannot even be somehow compared.
So your fantasy books, are those going to be also in the future, or are they in the past?
They are based on another planet that has not evolved the same way that we did. So they possess magic, so they didn't have to develop technology because they can solve their problems with magic, which means they are still in a medieval-like setting.
Oh, all right. So what do you think? Is there alien life, yes or no?
it would be pretty narrow-minded to think that there isn't. I mean, what were the odds of us existing, of our planet having the exact right distance to the sun that we could evolve? So why shouldn't that happen in a limitless galaxy somewhere else?
I agree. I agree. I just had a guy on who did a UFO documentary, and he had some pretty interesting film. He was talking about how the UFOs are often spotted around erupting volcanoes because they have the technology to fly around in that, where our military planes do not. And it was one way that they could come and be undetected. And I thought it was an interesting hypothesis or observation, whatever you want to call it. It kind of made sense. But what sort of movies do you like to watch?
I'm probably one of the biggest Marvel Cinematic Universe fan there is. That's why I also based my books on that idea. So I have written the sci-fi and fantasy, but in the end, those characters and worlds, they will all clash together and become one large universe, like the MCU did. And I'm even setting this thing up in the first book that I just published.
Okay. Are you shopping these around for movies at all?
Come again?
Are you shopping around your books to be turned into screenplays to make movies from them?
I'm not actively going to look for that right now. It would be an awesome thing, I guess, that has potential to be turned into a movie. But I guess that is only happening if I'm like super known and famous for that stuff.
Well, I guess I should have asked the question a little differently. Would you be interested in doing that, or because some people don't? Some people say, nope, my book is my book, and that's it. I don't want it changed.
I think that many scenes that I've written were like in my head. They were already like some movie scene. I'm trying to describe things as if you would watch them from the outside. And I think that's perfect for movies. I would pretty much love if that is ever on a screen.
Okay. Have you seen the movie The Passengers?
I heard of it, but I didn't see it now.
Okay. That might be one you want to put on your short list. Basically, it's about people who leave Earth and they're going to a colony that takes 90 years to get to, so they have to put them in suspended animation. Yeah. And one of them accidentally wakes up and there's still 80 or 90 years or something left on the trip, and he doesn't know what to do with himself, but he figures out something, and it's kind of cool. It's a nice premise.
You know that the Marvel Cinematic Universe also does something that no other franchise has ever done before that I know of, is that they also mixed the fantasy and the science fiction by bringing, for example, the Nordic mythology into the whole thing with bringing Thor in.
Well, I always was baffled with traditional publishers as to why that they wouldn't allow people to mix genres, because I've heard that from authors where they wrote something that was sort of sci-fi / fantasy, and it came back from the publisher saying, it can be one or the other, not both. And they had to either rewrite the whole story or edit half of it out. I understand it from a marketing perspective, but, maybe it's time to just create subgenre shelves in the bookstores. I don't know.
I mean, that's still the reason they have. It's just business politics, I guess. And they don't know if it sells, it's a risk, so they don't do it, as long as the other genres are still selling well enough. And that's why I chose self-publishing, because I don't like to be told that I have to change things that are basically part of my story just because they think it will sell better. I wouldn't feel good about that.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you're sticking to your principles. That's always a good thing. And if it sells, it'll sell, and if it doesn't, you just keep writing.
Yeah, because if you like what you do,
if you like what you're doing, right, it makes no difference. We do have to wrap this up. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Yeah, it's omni-legends.com. I have my English book there, and if you switch to the German language, you can see already the other ones that I published here in Germany.
Thank you so much for coming on the show and telling us about your books.